The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
This is why I tell you not to be worried about food and drink for yourselves or about clothes for your body. Is not life more important than food, and is not the body more important than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow, they do not harvest, and they do not store food in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you less worthy than they are? And can any of you add a day to your life by worrying about it? Why are you so worried about your clothes? Look at how the flowers in the field grow. They do not toil or spin, but I tell you that not even Solomon in all his wealth was clothed like one of these. If God so clothes the grass in the field, which blooms today and is to be burned tomorrow in the oven, how much more will he clothe you, you people of little faith? The Gospel of the Lord.
Jesus Christ.
So I'm glad that the mini marathon didn't hold you from getting here this morning, thank God. I'm glad that the church has put aside a season or a month like this to get us to focus on creation, because I don't think it's something that I would naturally be thinking about myself. I'd say it's important, but I wouldn't set aside a certain day for it. So thank God that the church in its wisdom has done this. I think too as well that people of my generation, and by the way, I'm 75 now, you mightn't think it, but I am. I think people of my generation and a little bit younger don't think as much about this subject as people who are younger, as young people do. In fact, I think in the last few years, young people have done most of the running. And they present the challenge. And it seems to me there's a number of things that young people are saying to us that we're challenged to listen to, particularly young people. First thing is, they're saying to us that they're afraid. I don't know if we always hear that. They're afraid that climate change and global warming will be so strong that there mightn't be any earth there at all worth talking about when they get as old as I am, or most of you here in the church are, because it's people of your age who are mostly in churches. So they're afraid there'll be no earth, or what will they do? I think some young people as well are aware that maybe they don't go to Mass and maybe they don't pray formally very often, but they find God maybe in creation more than we think. Our generation, my generation. They find God in flowers, or in trees, in lakes, and in rivers, on top of mountains, and in that whole area of creation. God talks to them, they listen to him. Some of them, not all of them. And there's a slight fear that if climate change keeps happening and the earth keeps burning up, that they won't experience that kind of God, because there'll be no earth there. Young people too, I think, have a sense that there's a connection between injustice in our world and climate change, that the very people who suffer most from global warming and climate change are people who didn't cause it and who suffer from it, because it's been caused mainly through greed from people in the West who have more than they want but can't contain their greed. They're very conscious of that there's that connection between injustice and what's happening to our world. And I think, I'm only guessing this, I think some young people at least are a bit confused. And they're a bit confused because people of my generation are saying we believe in God, we believe in God's creation, in God's goodness which is expressed in it. We say that very often. We say that we believe in Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ was on the side of the poor and the hungry, and he says that what we do to the hungry and to the prisoner and to the lonely and to the isolated, that we do to him. Now they hear that, and they hear us saying that we believe that, and yet that in lots of places and at lots of times they don't see any action on behalf of making our creation better. So they're a bit confused. They're just some of the things I suggest that young people might be saying to us. And you know, when I was thinking about this during the week, I'm amazed, really. I was quite surprised, but I shouldn't have been. There's an extraordinary connection between what they're saying and what Pope Francis says in his letter a few years ago, Laudato Si. He says the same kind of things. He might say them differently, but Francis says that one of the principal ways that we come in touch with God's goodness and God's love and God's beauty and God's care is when we look at creation. It's a message, a great message, a fundamental message about what God is like. That's what Francis says. Francis as well states very clearly that there's a connection between injustice in our world and climate change or global warming. He says it very, very clearly that the global warming and its effect in creation is done to people who didn't cause it, and they're the people who will suffer most from it. It's basically caused by greed in the West from people not being happy with what they have. So there's a very strong connection in that letter by Francis between injustice and what's happening to the poor of this world. Francis in that letter also says, he says, we need a new kind or a different kind of spirituality. My generation does. We were brought up with a very strong emphasis on saving your soul. That we're preparing in this life for the next life. That what's important is what goes on in the next life. We were brought up to be private, be concerned for our private sins and have our private devotions. Francis said they're all important, but what we need is a spirituality which says we're not just souls, we're bodies. We're not just about the future in heaven. We're about this earth and what happens in it, and that's important. And we're not just about being individuals. We are very much a community of people, and we have an effect on one another. Francis says as well that we Christians and Catholics, if we take this issue seriously, trying to change what's going on with climate change and the destruction of creation, we're also being joined by a whole lot of other people, whether they're Catholic, Protestants, dissenters, or no faith at all, and that it puts us in touch with a much wider world. And he says, Francis says, that this is the issue of our time. Well, that's a strong statement. This is the issue of our time. So there you are. Our God, our Pope, and our young people are saying to us that all this is urgent. So the question is, what do we do? It's not easy. And traditionally, when people were faced with a moral question, and it's still valid, or about what you should do, there were 3 steps. Don't worry, I'm not going to keep you all morning. 3 steps. The first one was see. Look, become aware. And I'd like to put into that, listen. We need to do an awful lot more listening. Listening to what the Pope says. Listen to what our young people are saying. Listen to their fear. Try to get to the root of it. Listen not just with our ears, but listen with our hearts, and listen with compassion. Because if we listen, and if we hear, and if we show that we're listening, we build a relationship. So listen. That's the first step. And the second step, I think, is to judge traditionally. Judge what we hear. Judge what we see. Read about it. Think about it. Ask ourselves questions. What's central in this issue? What am I called to do? What will it mean for me? What will I have to give up? How can I influence other people? Make a judgment. And the third step in trying to make any kind of a moral decision is, I've now listened, I've seen, as it were, I've made a judgment. Now, what do I do? So see, judge, and act. And what we might have to do is maybe just join. There's a whole lot of other, thank God, there's a whole lot of other people involved in this, and they're increasing. It's just to put our weight behind what other people are doing. It might be just to ask myself, what are my gifts in this area, in the way I think and pray? What are my resources? What kind of money have I? And how can I make a contribution, and where? But listen, I think if we see enough, if we're sensitive enough, if we really hear, if we accept the problem, if we accept the urgency of it, then I think we'll find within ourselves what action we can take. In a few minutes' time, we'll all stand, those of us who can, and we'll say the Our Father. And in that prayer, we'll make a petition which we make every time we say it. And the petition is this. We'll say, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Your will be done on earth. So we know what God's will is. It's very clear in this area. What we need to do as we say that petition is pray that we'll have the generosity, and we'll have the goodness in us, and we'll have the determination to do it.